The job posting hung askew on the crowded bulletin board in the mall's break room, a beacon of opportunity among the faded flyers for babysitting gigs and lost cat notices. Seasonal Santa wanted, $20 an hour plus tips, it declared in bold red and green letters, accompanied by a cheerful cartoon Santa holding a sack of gifts. Jeff's golden eyes narrowed as he stared at the flyer, his clawed finger tapping the paper thoughtfully. "This," he announced with dramatic flair, "is my calling." Arthur, leaning against the break room counter with a coffee in hand, froze mid-sip. "Your what?" "My calling," Jeff repeated, spinning to face him with his usual over-the-top enthusiasm. His glittery cape, a recent addition to his wardrobe, flared slightly as he struck a heroic pose. "Think about it, Arthur. Mortals pour their deepest desires into Santa Claus. If I become him, I'll have access to the innermost wants of humankind." Arthur lowered his coffee slowly, his face a mask of disbelief. "You want to be a mall Santa to spy on kids?" "To understand them," Jeff corrected, a glint of determination in his eyes. "Desires, dreams, ambitions. It's intel, Arthur. And who better to fulfill it than me?" Arthur set his coffee down with a heavy sigh. "Jeff, you terrify them. You're not exactly what people picture when they think of Santa." Jeff crossed his arms, indignant. "I am jolly. I am wise. I am benevolent." "You're a 7-foot demon who cackles when he's happy," Arthur interrupted. "I don't think you're the vibe they're going for." Jeff ignored the jab, turning back to the flyer. "Nonsense. Watch and learn, Arthur. This is destiny." Mr. Gregory, the mall manager, had seen his fair share of questionable Santas over the years. College kids needing extra cash, retirees who fell asleep mid-shift, and one guy who got caught stealing from the gift shop. But when Jeff walked into his office, the man blinked twice, wondering if he was hallucinating. Jeff stood tall, his red skin gleaming faintly under the fluorescent lights. His sharp claws clicked together as he adjusted his glittery cape. "I'm here about the Santa position," he announced. Arthur trailed behind, looking apologetic. "I told him this was a bad idea," he muttered. Mr. Gregory glanced between the two of them, his brain struggling to process what he was seeing. You want to be Santa?" "Indeed," Jeff boomed, his voice filling the small office. "I am uniquely qualified for the role. I possess charisma, wisdom, and an unparalleled dedication to the craft." Mr. Gregory eyed Jeff's sharp teeth, then turned to Arthur. "Is this some kind of prank?" Arthur shook his head. "Unfortunately, no." Jeff stepped closer, leaning on the desk. "Picture it. A Santa unlike any other. Memorable, inspiring. I guarantee I'll make your mall the talk of the town." Mr. Gregory hesitated, his gaze flicking to the stack of Santa applications on his desk. None of them had been particularly promising. With a resigned sigh, he handed Jeff the paperwork. "Fine. Just don't scare the kids." Jeff grinned, though he carefully avoided showing too many teeth. "You won't regret this." The Santa suit Jeff procured was unlike anything sold in department stores. He claimed he'd found it in the back of a cursed wardrobe, and it showed. The red velvet shimmered with faint, unearthly symbols that only became visible under certain angles of light. The black boots and gloves were polished to a mirror shine, and the hat, while mostly traditional, had a subtle flame-like flicker at the tip. Arthur watched as Jeff adjusted the belt around his waist, his expression a mix of horror and exhaustion. "You look like Santa's evil twin." Jeff admired himself in the mirror, striking various poses. "Nonsense, I look magnificent. The mortals will love me." "They're going to run screaming," Arthur muttered, pulling on his ill-fitting elf costume. The green tunic was too tight in the shoulders, and the striped tights were an indignity he'd never live down. "Why am I even doing this?" "Because every great Santa needs an elf," Jeff said, clapping Arthur on the shoulder. "And you, my friend, are the best elf a demon could ask for." The Santa station was nestled in a cozy corner near the mall's enormous Christmas tree. Fake snow dusted the ground, oversized candy canes arched overhead, and a plush red throne sat at the center. Jeff strode in like a king entering his court, nodding approvingly at the festive decorations. Arthur trailed behind, muttering to himself, "This is a disaster waiting to happen." The first child in line was a boy clutching a stuffed dinosaur, his wide eyes darting nervously toward Jeff. The boy's mother gave him a gentle nudge, and he hesitantly climbed onto Jeff's lap. "Well, hello there, young mortal," Jeff said, his booming voice echoing across the station. The boy flinched, and Arthur winced. Jeff leaned closer, softening his tone. "What is it you desire most in the world?" The boy clutched his dinosaur tighter. A train set?" Jeff nodded solemnly. "A wise choice. Trains symbolize boundless journeys and endless possibilities." He handed the boy a candy cane, who blinked up at him in awe before scrambling off his lap. Arthur raised an eyebrow as the boy and his mother walked away. "You didn't scare him? I'm shocked." "Of course not," Jeff said smugly. "I told you, children adore me." As the day went on, Jeff's dramatic demeanor somehow began to win the children over. Each wish was met with a theatrical proclamation, every candy cane handed out with a flourish. Parents watched from the sidelines, bemused but entertained. Then came the girl with the unusual wish. She was small, with solemn eyes and a tattered scarf wrapped around her neck. She climbed onto Jeff's lap with none of the hesitation the others had shown. Leaning close, she whispered, "I want the music box my mommy promised me before she went away." Jeff's playful grin faded as he studied her. His demonic intuition prickled, sensing something deeper behind her words. "A noble wish," he said softly. "One that deserves to be fulfilled." Arthur frowned as the girl walked away. "What are you planning?" Jeff adjusted his hat, his expression unreadable. "That child's wish is tied to something unfinished. I need to find out what." Arthur groaned. "Why can't you ever just stick to normal?" Jeff smirked. "Where's the fun in that?" The next morning, Jeff arrived at the mall with the air of someone ready to conquer a kingdom. His Santa suit looked as pristine as ever, its faint eldritch shimmer reflecting off the garlands strung along the mall's ceiling. Arthur trudged behind him, looking more resigned than festive in his elf costume, which now sported a mysterious coffee stain on one sleeve. "You're late," Arthur muttered. "We were supposed to be here 15 minutes ago." Jeff waved a dismissive hand. "Santa is never late, Arthur. He arrives precisely when he means to." "That's not how shifts work," Arthur grumbled, but Jeff was already striding toward the Santa station, his boots clicking loudly against the tile floor. As the first children lined up, Jeff leaned back on his oversized throne, surveying them like a benevolent monarch. Arthur took his place nearby, trying to look busy with a clipboard he didn't actually need. The first child of the day, a boy no older than 7, climbed onto Jeff's lap. He was holding a crayon drawing of a race car and immediately launched into a detailed explanation of why it needed flames painted on the sides. Jeff nodded solemnly, as though the child were explaining the secrets of the universe. "A vehicle of speed and fire. Excellent choice. I shall see to it personally." Arthur leaned in. "You're not actually giving him a race car, right?" Jeff smirked. "Of course not. I have something better." He reached into his red velvet sack, a sack he'd enchanted himself because mortal toys are boring, as he put it. His clawed hand emerged holding a small toy car. But when the boy grabbed it, the flames painted on the sides flickered to life, tiny wisps of harmless smoke curling up from the hood. The boy's eyes widened. "Whoa!" Arthur snatched the toy, inspecting it. "Is it supposed to do that?" Jeff crossed his arms, clearly pleased with himself. "It's perfectly safe. Just a touch of demonic craftsmanship to make it more memorable." Arthur shook his head, reluctantly handing the toy back. "Fine, just no more enhancements, okay?" But Jeff, naturally, ignored him. As the day went on, his interpretations of the children's wishes became increasingly creative. A little girl who asked for a doll received a figure that danced on its own when music played. A boy wanting a stuffed animal got a teddy bear whose laugh sounded unsettlingly lifelike, especially in the quiet of night. A child asking for a puzzle received one that rearranged its pieces when no one was looking. "Jeff," Arthur whispered urgently after confiscating a jack-in-the-box that wouldn't stop singing Jingle Bells in a minor key, "you can't just give kids haunted toys." "They're not haunted," Jeff replied indignantly. "They're enhanced, enriched. These are gifts they'll remember forever." Arthur gestured toward the pile of confiscated toys. "Yeah, because they'll spend years in therapy trying to forget them." Jeff shrugged. Mortal childhoods are supposed to be formative. Amid the chaos, Jeff hadn't forgotten the girl with the music box wish. Between children's visits, he whispered incantations to his sack. summoning object after object, but none matched the description of the lost toy. Arthur caught him sifting through the growing pile of magical knickknacks behind the Santa station. "What are you doing?" "Searching," Jeff said simply, his voice unusually serious. "That girl's wish has weight, Arthur. It's tied to something unfinished." Arthur frowned. "You're really taking this seriously, huh?" Jeff paused, glancing at him. "A promise unfulfilled can fester, Arthur. It's dangerous to leave such things unresolved." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you care about unresolved promises?" Jeff's grin returned, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Since it became my job, of course." As the afternoon wore on, the chaos from Jeff's gifts began to ripple through the mall. A parent stormed up to the Santa station, holding the laughing teddy bear at arm's length. "This thing hasn't stopped giggling for 2 hours. My daughter's too scared to touch it." Jeff leaned forward, inspecting the bear. "That means it's working perfectly." "Working!" the parent sputtered. Arthur stepped in, grabbing the bear. "We'll fix it. Right, Jeff?" Jeff looked genuinely confused. "What's there to fix?" Before Arthur could argue, a sharp cry echoed across the concourse. They turned to see a toy train, one of Jeff's earlier creations, zipping down an escalator at high speed, with a gaggle of children chasing after it. "Jeff!" Arthur hissed. "What did you do?" "I made the train more exciting," Jeff said defensively. "It's a feature, not a bug." The chaos reached a peak when the mall manager, Mr. Gregory, appeared, looking frazzled. "What's going on here?" "I've had 3 complaints about your Santa gifts." Jeff rose from his throne, looming over the much shorter man. "Complaints? Impossible. My gifts are bringing joy and wonder to these children." Mr. Gregory gestured wildly toward the runaway train, which was now circling the food court. "Does that look like joy to you?" Jeff followed his gaze, considering the scene. "Perhaps enthusiasm?" Arthur grabbed Jeff's arm, pulling him aside. "You need to tone it down. If we get fired, I'm not covering for you." Jeff sighed dramatically. "Fine. No more enhancements. But I'm keeping the sack." As the day drew to a close, Jeff remained fixated on the music box wish. While Arthur dealt with angry parents and calmed crying children, Jeff wandered toward the storage area behind the Santa station. The door was marked "Authorized Personnel Only," but Jeff ignored it, pushing it open with ease. Inside, dusty shelves stretched into the shadows, filled with forgotten decorations and toys. At the far end, a faint glow caught Jeff's attention. He approached cautiously, his claws flexing at his sides. There, amid a pile of broken ornaments, sat a small music box. Its edges were worn, and its brass key gleamed faintly in the dim light. Jeff reached for it, but as his fingers brushed the surface, a sharp jolt of energy shot through him. He recoiled, narrowing his eyes. The music box pulsed faintly, as though alive. "Interesting," Jeff murmured, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Very interesting." The storage room was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum emanating from the music box as Jeff stared down at it. The glow from its brass edges pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. He reached for it again, slower this time, his claws flexing cautiously. The air around the box felt charged, buzzing faintly against his fingertips. "Jeff?" Arthur's voice broke the stillness as he poked his head through the doorway. "What are you doing back here?" Jeff didn't turn. "I found it." "Found what?" Arthur stepped closer, squinting at the small object in Jeff's hand. "Wait. Is that the music box?" Jeff nodded, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "It's more than just a music box, Arthur. It's tethered to something unfinished." Arthur frowned. "What do you mean, tethered? Like haunted tethered?" Jeff turned to face him, the glow of the box casting faint golden light across his sharp features. More like connected to a promise. Something the girl's mother couldn't fulfill before she passed. Arthur stared at him, the weight of Jeff's words sinking in. "So, what are you planning to do?" Jeff's grin returned, wide and toothy. "Deliver it, of course. I am Santa, after all." Back at the Santa station, the line of children had thinned as the mall wound down for the evening. Jeff perched on his oversized throne, cradling the music box like a precious artifact. Arthur hovered nearby, keeping an eye out for Mr. Gregory, who had already threatened to shut them down twice that day. You sure this is a good idea? Arthur asked, glancing nervously at the glowing object. Jeff raised an eyebrow. Arthur, have I ever had a bad idea? Arthur crossed his arms. Do you want the long list alphabetically or chronologically? Before Jeff could retort, the girl from earlier appeared at the edge of the station. Her scarf looked even more tattered in the dim light, and her wide, solemn eyes locked onto Jeff immediately. You came back, Jeff said, his voice softer than usual. The girl nodded. Did you find it? Jeff held up the music box, its glow reflecting in her gaze. It's yours. She hesitated, her small hands twitching at her sides. Mommy said it was special. She said it would play her favorite song. Jeff knelt in front of her, lowering himself to her level. And it still will. He placed the box in her hands, and as her fingers brushed its surface, the glow brightened. The girl turned the brass key slowly, and the box began to play a hauntingly beautiful melody. Her face lit up with wonder, a small smile breaking through her solemn demeanor. Thank you, she whispered. As the girl and her mother's song echoed softly through the mall, something shifted. The air around the music box thickened, and the glow grew brighter, casting long shadows across the station. Arthur stepped back instinctively. Jeff? I think something's happening. Jeff didn't move, his golden eyes narrowing as he watched the girl clutch the box. Stay calm, Arthur. It's just... Before he could finish, the glow erupted outward in a blinding flash. The decorations around the station rattled, and the oversized candy canes tipped precariously. The music box's melody swirled through the air, now accompanied by whispers that seemed to echo from nowhere. Arthur panicked. This is not normal. Why is it never normal with you? The girl stood still, seemingly unaffected by the chaos around her. The whispers grew louder, forming words. Thank you for keeping your promise. Jeff's expression softened as he realized what was happening. It's her mother. She's saying goodbye. The light from the music box began to fade, and the whispers quieted until only the melody remained. The girl looked up at Jeff, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. She's happy now, she said, hugging the box to her chest. Just as Jeff and Arthur began to relax, a new commotion erupted from the crowd. One of Jeff's enhanced gifts, a set of enchanted reindeer figurines, had come to life and was galloping across the mall concourse, scattering shoppers in all directions. Oh, come on, Arthur shouted, chasing after the reindeer. Jeff followed at a leisurely pace, clearly unconcerned. They're just stretching their legs. It's fine. It's not fine, Arthur yelled, dodging a plastic antler that nearly took his coffee out of his hands. Meanwhile, a group of animated nutcrackers, another of Jeff's creations, marched past the fountain, drumming furiously on their tiny drums. Parents shouted, children squealed, and Mr. Gregory appeared at the edge of the chaos, his face a mix of horror and fury. Jeff, he bellowed. What did you do this time? Jeff raised his hands innocently. I enhanced the holiday spirit. Isn't this what you wanted? Festivity, excitement. Arthur grabbed Jeff's arm, dragging him toward the center of the chaos. Fix it. Now. Jeff sighed dramatically, waving a clawed hand. The reindeer froze mid-gallop, their plastic hooves clicking faintly as they returned to their original positions. The nutcrackers stopped drumming, their painted faces blank once more. The crowd began to settle, though a few parents shot Jeff dirty looks as they herded their kids away. Mr. Gregory stomped up to him, red-faced. You're done, he snapped. Pack up your things and get out. Jeff, however, remained unbothered. Very well, but remember, Mr. Gregory. He gestured toward the still glowing music box in the girl's hands. True holiday magic doesn't come from perfection. It comes from moments like this. Mr. Gregory opened his mouth to argue but stopped when the girl ran up to Jeff and hugged his leg. Thank you, Santa, she said, her voice muffled against the velvet fabric. Jeff patted her head gently. Merry Christmas, young mortal. Later, as Jeff and Arthur sat on a bench outside the mall, watching the last shoppers leave, Arthur turned to him with a grudging smile. You know, for all the chaos, you weren't a terrible Santa. Jeff smirked, raising a cup of hot cocoa. High praise, Arthur. High praise. Arthur took a sip of his coffee, leaning back. But if I ever have to dress as an elf again, I'm quitting. Noted, Jeff replied, his grin widening. But admit it. You had fun. Arthur groaned. You're impossible. And you wouldn't have me any other way, Jeff said, blowing a triumphant note on the rainbow kazoo he'd tucked into his fanny pack.